Welcome to the Woman's Connection. I'm barrie-louise, your moderator. The Woman's Connection is a program about events shaping women's lives and helping one gain authentic power on a personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned?
Welcome. Our guest is a psychologist, author, motivational speaker, and a resiliency coach, which I'd like to find out more about. And we're going to talk about girly talk. And that's a term that I think we're all familiar with, but yet we're not familiar with. And I would like to welcome Dr. Patricia O'Gorman. And welcome.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome, and it's a pleasure to have you here. Now, before we get into what exactly is the definition of girly talk, tell us a little bit more about your background, because it's quite varied.
It's quite varied, yes. I'm a psychologist in New York State. I'm the author of 9 books. This is my 9th book that's just come out. I've been in private practice for many, many years. I've run a rape crisis center. I at one point was the youngest division director in the public health service, and worked in child welfare. So it's, you know, a varied background. But throughout everything, I've always had a private practice where I've always heard women talking about this toxic inner dialogue, so particular to women. And so in this book, I have given it a name, and I call it Girly Thoughts, a slightly obnoxious term on purpose.
I'm glad to hear about your girly thoughts being a toxic, because I got turned off,
Yes.
you know, but I like the name of your book, The Girly Thoughts 10-Day Detox Plan, The Resilient Woman's Guide to Saying No to Negative Self-Talk and Yes to Personal Power. How did you come up about doing this?
Well, it was a long journey, if you will. I have several books on how we talk to ourselves, and I've always been interested in that as a psychologist, not just how other people talk to us, but how we talk to ourselves. So, but over the years, I've become very aware that as women, very different than men, we have a very specific way we talk to ourselves, and it's negative, and it's berating, and it's that we're fat or we're growing old. And growing old can start at 14, 13, 12. I talk about that in the book. It's that we have this kind of negative self-image, that we doubt ourselves in public about how we say and act and do, and it distracts us, it consumes energy, and it doesn't help us meet our goals. So I decided to really do something about that and address that as a very specific image. And I know many people in your audience, they've been to therapists, so I'm not saying no, you're not depressed, but maybe part of why you're depressed is maybe your girly thoughts, you know.
Well, now you're saying that these girly thoughts can come into play when you're 12, 13 years old.
Absolutely.
What creates these girly thoughts in the first place?
Well, that's a really good question, and probably the best way I can play it out is to give you a little scenario. Let's say you know a little cute 2-year-old, and she's in daycare, and she's called Bossy. Now, and that's a little confusing for her, because when she's called Bossy, what she's trying to do is solve a problem, take leadership, you know, contribute. And so she learns that's not such a good thing. But she goes to school, and she's a smart little girl. So she's got her hand up, and she's always got the answer. And she's called a know-it-all. And but she's smart, and she's spunky, and she plays soccer, and she's doing all these good things. Then she hits puberty, and she stops playing soccer. She becomes a fashionista. She realizes that you know, girls who are really smart aren't so popular, so maybe she doesn't quite put her hand up so much. She realizes that she's no longer talking like a little girl, so she starts talking like a little girl more purposefully, which is actually educators are beginning to comment upon, and I address it in my book, and it's called Sexy Girly Voice, or voice upping. And she realizes that to be popular is not to be smart, to be popular means she's going to pay a very big social price that, you know, Sheryl Sandberg even talked about in an interview. And she said she was worried in high school because she was so smart that she wouldn't have a date to the prom. So it's, you know, it's out there as kind of a cultural vibe that, you know, that women, I know this sounds obnoxious, and it is, but women are supposed to be smart, but be diminutive, you know, not take over, because if they take over, they're considered the B word. And yet we have women hired for very responsible positions and tortured because internally, because they feel they're coming on too strong, they won't be liked. And those are not issues that men have. So this all begins very gradually, what I'm calling girly thoughts. And when they begin to take over by the time a girl is a teenager, it really does begin to create havoc with her. And one of the things that's been documented, not so much in the Northeast, but big in the Southeast and the Southwest, are for 15-year-old birthday parties called quinceañeras or sweet 16s. They're being held in spas where girls are getting Botox. Yes, my darling, and that is to keep them youthful and gorgeous, which of course they are. But that concern about aging, which used to be something our grandmothers were concerned about, or our mothers are concerned about, teenagers are now concerned about. And that's all this girly thoughts coming in, taking over. And where does it come from? It comes, you know, society is a great contributor to this, and it's not one person pulling the strings, but all these messages that girls get. And you know, one of my favorite commercials, because it never ceases to make me laugh, is one for this guy who has a beard, clearly in his 60s, he's in good shape, but he's water skiing, or he's skydiving, or he's skiing, and then he's in a bar surrounded by teenagers who are oogling him as he's drinking a certain brand of beer. It's like, you'd never see a woman in an ad like that, you know, a 60-year-old woman being oogled by teenage boys, but it's acceptable, you know, and that's a reality. So as women, how do we make it through, be successful, and the trick is like ourselves? And part of that answer to that is to really have a name for this toxic inner dialogue, which I call girly thoughts. And someone has a better name for it, great. But if we have a name for something, we can externalize it. It's about, you know, it's about this thing I'm doing or thinking. It's not about me. And I see so many women in my office, and they think it's all about them. So that's what prompted me to write this book.
Saying that the girls for a sweet 16 or a 15-year-old is going for Botox?
Yes, going to Botox. Botox is the most commonly used plastic surgery procedure in the United States. And in certain spas, high-end spas, it's now where women are bringing their daughters for parties to celebrate key birthdays. And again, not so much in the Northeast, but I'm sure some of your listeners are saying, yes, I know my sister has told me about this in Texas. You know.
All right, so, well, let's go back to the demographics here.
Yeah.
Okay, the Northeast is not in the South. What's the difference between the two areas?
I think it's just marketing. I think a lot comes in from the West and comes here, so I think we can get ready for it. But, you know, for example, it's not unusual, what I've been, you know, what readers have told me, and people, you know, sending me emails through my website, is there something at spas called cattle calls. And what cattle calls are you just show up from 5 to 7, you don't need an appointment, and you just line up and you get your Botox shots.
I'm speechless.
I know, darling, but this is this obsession we have with youth and looks and how we act, and you know, it's toxic and it's getting worse.
Okay, so let me just get my head around this. How do we get out of girly thoughts to propel us? Because, you know, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you're in a situation and, you know, you've grown up, you've gone to college, you're in business, you're in a meeting, how do you curtail the girly thoughts and excel in business.
You know, you have just, identified something that's so important. What you do is you identify you're having a girly thought and you speak your mind. In business, you need to take up space. In business, you need to succeed. That's why you're there. And to really push aside these thoughts that say, as one woman told me recently, is I didn't speak up in a meeting that was very important. I had something really important to contribute because I was afraid people would notice my roots weren't done. Yes, I know people are falling on their chair watching this, but it's that kind of thinking, and it stops us. It silences us. And many wonderful books have been written about women lately. My contribution is to name that toxic inner dialogue that no one has a name for yet, and that's what I'm calling girly thoughts. That's what gets in the way of us developing confidence. That's why we have trouble leaning in. That's why we screw up our money that Susie Orman talks about. Everyone talks about this thing women do. I have a name for it. And I'm saying if we can identify it and say that's what we're doing, then we can wrap our mind around it and not do it. Get support, talk to our girlfriends about it, talk to our daughters about it, so that we don't have to buy into this, what becomes this toxic inner, as one of my commenters said, trash talk, that we would never talk to someone else the way we talk to ourselves. So why are we talking to ourselves that way?
Well, it's interesting that you say, talk to your girlfriends, talk to your daughters, but you didn't say talk to the men about it.
Well, my next book, actually, that I have identified in this book will be A Man's Guide to Girly Thoughts, because so many men who I have met have said, please write a book for men, because I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. My wife, my girlfriend, my daughter gets so upset, and I don't know what to do, because men, we don't understand what we're doing, but the men in our lives don't understand it either. So, if they can help us identify we're being hooked by a cultural norm that's really irrelevant to us, that can be a great assist to us saying, I don't have to worry about having gained 5 pounds over the holidays. I don't have to be consumed by that and think I'm awful and ugly and I'm going to fall off the face of the earth. Men don't talk that way. Women do.
Oh, all right. So, with men talking that way, men not talking that way, how do you turn off the girly thoughts?
Well, first of all, you identify them, and then you challenge them. And then you do what like you would do to any other negative thought. You say, like, I'm not interested. Get out of my head. I have to focus on this presentation. I'm not going to focus on the fact that it's a humid day and my hair is extra curly or just gone flat. That's irrelevant. But that is the kind of thing we do. And what does it do? It drains our energy. It trips us up. And it takes away some of our power. And if we were just focused on our tasks, which is very appropriate to do, I'm not saying don't dress appropriately, but don't be so worried about the stuff that's fairly irrelevant in the workforce, that's pretty irrelevant also in school.
So, would this mean that it also seems like it's coming into fear of failure?
Well, it's one of the things that was identified brilliantly, I thought, in the book that came out in April, I think, called Confidence Code, is that women tend to fear failure. So what they do is they don't do, and we only learn by doing, particularly at work. And if we stop ourselves, if we second guess ourselves at work, then what we wind up doing is we wind up putting ourselves in a position we don't want to be in. And we're the go-getters, those people who are on fire about the agency mission or the corporate, strategy, are not going to be seen as us, because we're concerned we may be laughed at, we may be seen as too pushy, too aggressive, the B word, rather than, being on fire by our thoughts about how to make a contribution.
Well, it's interesting because a woman who is aggressive and smart she is considered
Right.
I would say an outcast versus the B word or whatever.
Okay.
But a man who's got the same qualities,
Right.
he's accepted.
Right. So, you know, it goes with the territory. You can say, that's a girly thought you're having, you shouldn't do it, and you get support. You get support from other women. You get, and maybe not at work, but other women you know. And you realize you're at work not as a popularity contest. You're at work to be successful. And that's an image that women have and struggle with and pay a big price for. And what I'm saying is, if we can say we're having girly thoughts and that's getting in the way of us being as successful as we can be, then that can help us do what we need to do and want to do.
Now, what exercises can we find in your book or even on your blog to help us excel?
Well, one of the things we can do easily, actually, is to just say, okay, you know, what are my expectations at work for myself? And am I going to work to make friends, or am I going to work to do this job I was hired to do? And that alone can begin to, you know, break it out differently, and for us to consciously realize, no, we're at work. You know, we've just gotten a BA, we've just got an MBA. You know, we're at work to do this. And if people don't like us, we don't have to take it personally. Women tend to personalize conflict, and that at work really gets in our way. So I have strategies in my book to help women not personalize conflict. So therefore, what they can do is say, we can disagree without being disagreeable. I can disagree with you, you can disagree with me, and we can still respect each other. We may not be friends. We don't have to be friends. We have to work together. And part of what happens is that most of us spend most of our hours at work, and work for most of us is a pretty charged environment. So there are going to be disagreements. But, you know, getting back to that analogy, little scenario I talked about, you know, since women have dropped out of sports, we tend to personalize conflict. Guys who kind of continue in sports, they realize the team wins or loses, it's the team winning or losing. It's not just them. It's not all about them. One of my sons played rugby in college, and when a guy gets knocked down, and it's a terrible sport, by the way, but when a guy gets knocked down, another player will come over and help him up. You know, it's not personal. They don't have this antagonism. It's about a goal, and being goal-directed, not being personally attacked. And as women, society says it's all about you and your image and, you know, what you've caused. We don't have to buy into that. Is that hard? Yes. Is it doable? Of course.
Well, let me ask you this. Okay, with the millenniums, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, and then you have, you know, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. Are they being raised different because of the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, that was passed in the 70s? Do they think different, or is it still the undercurrent that you find?
Have they been raised differently? Yes. I mean, a lot has changed in family life, yes. But there's still this expectation of how women should be. The B word is still widely used. Women are seen as aggressive. Case in point, there was a research study that was released this summer of performance evaluations in Fortune 500 companies. And what they did is they did a sampling of performance evaluations of executives, Fortune 500 companies. They broke out men and women, and they scanned for negative comments made about personality. Now these Fortune 500, you know, managers, executives, performance evaluations, blind study, only broken out male and female. Guess what percentage of negative comments were made about women in these companies, about their personality, not about performance, about personality?
I'd say 98%.
Well, it was over 70%. Over 70. How about men?
28%.
3%.
Wow, I was high.
Yeah. Yeah, 3% versus over 70%. I mean, that says it all. So what does that mean? That means that's a given. Should it be there? No. Should we address it? Yes. But should we be cowed by it? No. Being cowed by it is what I'm calling a girly thought, you know.
That is amazing.
Isn't
That's
that stunning?
absolutely amazing.
That was after my book went to the publisher. Was sometime I wrote a blog about it. It was sometime this summer, I think, that I read the study. I mean, that is amazing, and that is current. But that also means that's a given. So if it's a given, what are we going to do about it? Not how do we try to avoid it. It's going to happen. If you're really smart and you really know your stuff, people aren't going to like you at work. So what do you do about that?
That's a good question. What do you do about it, and how do you couch it? Because I've been in situations where I've come up with a great idea and somebody else stole it and made it their own.
Well, one of the strategies I discuss in the book is if someone does that in a meeting, you say, well, as I said 15 minutes ago that George just repeated, I think we should, and you own it, and you keep coming back, and if people think you're obnoxious, they think you're obnoxious. You own that idea. That's your idea. And you don't play nice, because work is not nice the way we women think it, nice should be. Work is work, and it's exciting, and we love it, and we prepare many of our years to do it, and then we take away our power because we're trying to play by rules that don't exist. And I'm not saying we should be obnoxious and abrasive, but we should own our stuff. And to do that means you got to fight those girly thoughts that say, at work I have to be nice. And that's one of the big girly thoughts that I address in the book. And I say, no, you don't. You need to be professional. You need to use your skills, but maybe you don't have to be nice.
It's a double standard, is what it is.
It's very much of a double standard. It's alive and well, and it doesn't look like it's getting any better.
How does this translate into stress for women?
It translates into very high stress for women. I mean, looking at the scenario, we find eating disorders very common in women. We don't tend to find eating disorders so common in men. Why? Because part of it is a stress response. Women are stress eaters. So what I tell women is, if you want to lose weight, in my book I tell you how to lose weight. Fight your girly thoughts. You'll be less stressed, and you'll eat less. So it's the de-stress diet. But it does create more stress, and for women tend to use psychotherapy much more than men. Now you can say, well, they're more this, they're more that, they're more this, they're more that, they need psychotherapy. Well, what I think is that a lot of the stress, not all, a lot of the stress has to do with us trying to achieve standards that are really not achievable. I mean, it used to be that we were trying to be like the models and the actresses that were in the movies who were size 12 or 10. Well, they're all digitally altered now. I had a woman call into a radio show that I did, and she said, I am a model. And she said, I think I'm having girly thoughts. I wake up in the morning, I look in the mirror, and I don't look like me. I don't look like me. And is that a girly thought? And I felt so sad for her, because if she's a model, she's probably pretty beautiful. And but the real her is the digitally altered, made up her. That's the real her. And she's feeling this disconnect when she wakes up in the morning and brushes her teeth, that she's not who she is. But that's not unusual for so many women to feel like, well, the real me is the coiffed, it's the this, it's the that. It's not the me who hangs around in my jammies on Saturday morning, All
right. How do we get rid of the double standard because of the fact that men have got daughters? Mm-hmm. They're the ones who are part of teaching their children mm-hmm. how to grow up and behave. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So who's got the responsibility when you're young if it's, it's quite a bag.
It really is quite a bag, yeah. And, we could say we have to change society, we can have demonstrations. We've tried all that. I think each one of us needs to start our own revolution inside of ourselves, inside of our families, and challenge those notions as they come up within us, as they come up with our daughters. I recommend in my book the Girly Thought 10-Day Detox Plan for mothers and daughters to watch TV shows together and pick out the girly thoughts that are happening, not only in the advertisements, but also in the scenarios that we see on TV. You know, how many of the characters are really playing to gender stereotypes? I think that's why some of the recent shows that have come on are so intriguing, because they have women heroes who are not playing by the rules. You know, it's How to Get Away with Murder. I mean, that's a great show, but she doesn't play by the rules. She doesn't play by, and it makes her very compelling and very real.
Well, when you say that she doesn't play by the rules, I think the problem is she doesn't play by the standard rules, the society rules that men expect, and she's thinking outside the box, and she's independent, and she's showing her strength and her power.
Absolutely. Absolutely, she is, and as women, we're free to do that. Now, we may not be liked, but you know, we have friends who can like us. We have mothers and aunts who can like us. It doesn't have to be all our coworkers who like us. When our sons go to work, they're not so trapped by being likable as women are trapped by that. And not every woman, but so many women, until we learn not to do it. And so my book is about how to short circuit that so you can go to work, be successful, and not be getting in your own way.
Well, when you talk about short circuiting yourself, how does that play out in a relationship?
Well, one of the things, you know, we have a term that I'm sure many of your viewers have heard, and maybe they feel that they are, is codependent. And that is a term which I've always been, you know, very interested in. I've used with my own definition at times. And, you know, it's largely a female phenomena. It's not, you know, there are some men who feel they have codependency, but mostly it's women. And I think that's very much, again, this whole societal, you know, pressure for women to be a certain way, and, you know, and the force of that, and the force of taking care of others also means you're not taking care of yourself. But it's a double-edged sword. You're supposed to take care of yourself and remain forever 13 or 14 with that figure, and yet you're supposed to take care of everyone else too. And you know, it's bizarre to say it that way, and yet that's the expectation so many of us have.
Can somebody be very self-confident about themselves? I guess you can't, and be in a business situation and go from 100% self-confident to minus 100% self-confident in a business situation? Well,
not in this book, but in my book that came out last year called The Resilient Woman, I talk about different styles of resiliency. And one style that I find pretty common for women is what I call paradoxical resilience. And that is women who use their strengths in one part of their life. Let's say they use it at work, and then they come home, but they gave it the office, and now they put themselves in a one-down situation, and they're not using any of the strength, skills, strategies that maybe they used at work in their home situation, or in the reverse. You know, it's interesting as women. We really do feel, I think, that if we are powerful, we won't be loved, and we have such a need to be loved that we give up our power. And yet, I think women can have both. They just maybe can't have both in the same places. You know?
So you can be powerful and loved at home.
Yes.
And then when you get to the office,
you can be effective, commanding, a presence, but maybe people won't love you. But do you need to be loved at work? You know, do you need to be loved at work? Maybe you can be respected at work. Maybe you can be admired at work. But do you have to be loved? I don't know. And yet,
I don't think you have to be loved at work.
Yes.
Respected, yes.
Yes, yes.
But not loved. I mean, love is a whole nother category. A big topic, besides sex, is money.
Oh, sex. We can talk about sex, too. Sex and money.
Okay, let's talk about sex and money.
Okay. You know, sex is very, very interesting. And there's just beginning to be research on women's sexuality. There has been much more research, and you know, big pharma has come behind men's sexuality. Women's sexuality, though, has been just beginning to be researched, and the findings are really going to upend everything we think about sex.
In what way?
In what way? Okay. One of the things is that women find a variety of images more sexually titillating than men do. So women are, believe it or not, according to the research we have at this point, much more easily stimulated by visual images than men are. And by visual images, because when we think of sexual images, we tend to think of women's bodies sexually. But women can be sexually stimulated by men's bodies, by men and other men, by animals. Yes,
by animals?
By animals copulating. That women can be sexually stimulated by a variety of other images than just this very narrow band of only a woman's body is sexually stimulating. So that's number one. Number two, some research, early findings, and your viewers will love this, is that it appears that when we talk about marital sex and we say, well, women get turned off by marital sex, and they're not so interested in sex. Well, part of that is because women need more stimulation and enjoy more stimulation, and women who are more sexually active are women in monogamous relationships where their partners are more inventive. And where there is just more foreplay, and it's, this whole concept of marital sex and how it becomes duty is because men stop stimulating women and women stop stimulating themselves. And when that changes, when men are more stimulating, when women are more, inventive on their own, marital sex can continue at a very high degree for many years. So this falling out of sex and blaming it on the women, which we tend to do, and we have these notions, well, men are polyamorous. Well, I have a feeling women are probably, people are going to really have a hard time with this, probably also can be just as polyamorous as men, but the societal norms say, well, a man is, he's, a stud, but a woman is a whore. So
we go back to this double standard again.
We go back to the double standard, but the research just on sexuality is really beginning to upend all these notions we have about sex and women. So I think we can look forward to the research showing and women coming out of these, it's like women at work, I have to be a certain way. Women at sex have to be a certain way. And as women can push through that, and hopefully some of this research will help them, things can be more enjoyable for both parties, with women making more demands about what they need and desire, and men saying, great, I didn't know that was, And, this whole thing about housework, women at the end of the day, if a man comes into bed, with his partner, and he is interested, in sex, and he's had the whole evening relaxing, he's come home from work, he's had a drink, he's been served dinner, he's been able to relax and unwind and maybe read a little, and the woman has come home from her executive position into her second job, and she's helping the kids with the homework, and she's supervising the dinner preparation or doing it herself and throwing in a load of laundry. By the time she gets into bed, she's exhausted. So one of the things that's really important is, if you want your partner and you to have some time together, plan it so therefore you're both not rolling into bed exhausted. Nobody is going to be sexual at that point. And to really think about this in a way about what your needs are, get rid of these girly thoughts that say you should do this, should do that. Maybe you plan an evening to get into bed with the kids, with your husband, and you leave the dishes and you leave the laundry and you have a good time.
It's kind of like saying, why does it have to be spick and span?
Right. Why does it have to be spick and span? Or planning an afternoon date and get daycare for the kids and plan an afternoon date on a weekend. It's about taking care of your needs. But women, the research is showing, are just as sexual as men. They're just a lot more tired, and sex takes energy. I gave a a luncheon talk recently, and one guy in the audience got up and asked for a broom. So
A broom?
A broom. He wanted to do some housework. You know, and if that message could come out to your readership, you know, then that is something that would be, you know, helpful. You know, there are ways of really making a difference in one's life by changing your thinking, by making some demands. And another place that plays out is in money.
Patricia, this has just been phenomenal listening about girly thoughts. In the closing moments of the show, what would you like to leave the audience with?
I'd like to leave them with the idea that they can do something about their toxic inner dialogue, that it's simple. This is a fun book I've written. It's about a serious topic. It's a fun book. I have on my website, patriciaogorman.com, I have a blog. They can subscribe to it for free. I want for each of us to really address this, because it's something we can do in our lives. And then we can pull in our girlfriends and pull in our parents and our daughters. And we can create, you know, a resistance to that double standard by not buying into it ourselves.
Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Do you have girly thoughts? I hope, at least if you do, they're powerful. Love to hear from you. Please write us here at The Woman's Connection. Bye now.